Just for those that don't know me, I'm not a meteorologist, I'm not a scientist or anything like that. I'm just a forester. I knew the Dutch elm disease because I was brought up in Essex, and I think that's probably why I joined forestry. I made quite a bit of money out of it. But since then, I went around the Highlands of Scotland covering everything with Sitka spruce. Then I started going to timber harvesting, and I know more about the inside of a timber harvesting machine than I know about actually growing the trees. But it was during my time when I was at Westonbirt Arboretum that people kept going on about the climate change issue again. And we had a lot of visitors come to see our lovely red maples. And I thought, well, it's a bit muddy, let's do another collection of maples. So we got lots of money from the Rotary International, and we planted another glade of maples. It was about that time, I say, all this climate change stuff was coming out. And I asked one of our scientists, can you just tell us what it means for the Arboretum? And they did a quick scan. And they came back to me and said, actually, John, your maples are not very good in drought years. And by the way, you've probably put them in the wrong place. And I said, should I have known that? And he said, yeah, all your information's in front of you. You're just not looking at it. And that was the start of my crusade. I kind of turned poacher come gamekeeper or whatever you say, and I thought, there's something in this. So is there any way we can turn the science into talking to foresters in black and white rather than all this grey? So I was asked to have a look at the Forest Enterprise woodlands, and this was the picture I got of the conifer species. Does this follow me around or not? I suppose the scary bit to me was whether we're in the southeast, we had pines, we had the opposite in the northwest, we had Sitka spruce growing there, but we had red barn needle blight, and that's one heck of a lot of the Corsican pine gone. Since then, we've got Phytophthora and larch. And I'm told, actually, funnily enough, Sitka spruce out in Vancouver, they don't grow it anymore because they've got a weevil there that takes the leader out. And I thought, whoa, that means we haven't got an awful lot of tree species we're using, have we? So this Clara thing came up, and I bumped into the same thought. I hadn't even thought about native woodlands. I'm just saying to myself, look, it's nice and easy. It's a conifer issue. Our native woodlands are pretty secure. And that's a statistic that was put in front of me. Now, we're facing Clara and ash. Let's not forget that already we got a big issue with sycamore and beech, with squirrels and deer. It's a big issue there. We lost elm. It was 5%. We're talking about nearer 20% here with ash. Because some of that's in the mixed woodlands. And when I was at a Forest Health Day the day there, we were looking at oak woodlands and acute oak decline. And the scientist there was telling me that the last really bad episode in the 1920s was associated with a defoliating moth, as well as the fungus. And we don't have that now, that defoliating moth. But hey, in London, we've got another moth hanging around, haven't we? You add that to it, we could have some serious problems. But I asked the grants people about what planting's going on, and there's not a huge amount outside of what you're seeing there getting used in our forests. So it's a pretty small risk. Anyway, just a real quickie, how do we get there? Foresters were quite good in the past. When we first started, we didn't have chemicals, we didn't have ploughs, so we tried to match the tree species to the soil. Seems a fairly obvious sort of thing. And I came out of college with that belief. But when I joined the Forestry Commission, I got given a huge great plough, I got given a helicopter to spread fertilisers, and I created massive monocultures. I was really proud of the job I did, because that's what I was asked to do. Yeah? And we're still reaping some of the benefits from that. But since then, we kind of seem to have lost our way, and we've become very IT, less people, cuts in money, less people on the ground. Yeah, we've kind of gone through an era. But the point is, we are now starting to talk about the actual trees again. Yeah, and that's because we're losing them. So can you just bear me when I read this poem, because it rather captured my imagination when it was given to me, because it's a bit further back than I thought. Ode to a spruce. I can accept the plant demands, the pines I must reduce. We'll have a walk along the moor and look for ground for spruce. We saw the rocks, we saw the stones. For pine its only use. It's better than it looks, he said. I think we'll try some spruce. We saw the different kind of heath on pod soles tight and loose. He kicked them with his foot and said, it's good enough for spruce. What's underneath the unploughed land is harder to deduce. We thought contorta would be safe. He said, we'll risk some spruce. On better ground we pondered much, our thoughts far from obtuse. We thought of larch and silver firs. He said, we'll stick to spruce. On poorer ground we thought of pine. He said, that's no excuse. If in doubt, contorta out. You're safer with spruce. Beneath the birch or grassy slope, we thought we'd introduce some grandest fir to make a change. He said, what's wrong with spruce? We left the hill and headed home. Our totals to produce, all others came to 1%, leaving 99 for spruce. We created woodlands with no diversity, and I can remember colleagues that went the other way from me, went into things like Natural England, said your monocultures are dangerous, too much reliance on one species. It'll come home to roost. And I suggest that we've seen that with Corsican pine, and maybe with other things we're seeing the same. And the scary bit is globalization. This is not my work, this is just the introduction of more pests and diseases. And one thing that I tend to pick up from that kind of bothers me is not only just the amount of them, but the number of times people seem to connect this with trade from Asia. I don't know, just worries me. But there is a reality, we've got an issue there with pests and diseases. They say we could spread the risk by planting a wider range of species than we currently do. Oh yeah, see that wasn't even on there when I got this. Right, and then the other little bit in the room, which is where I kind of started from, was climate change. And here in Thetford, you've probably got some of the most challenging climate in the whole of the UK. One, you get really dry summers as it is, and you've got some pretty unhelpful soils. And what our experts are saying to us is that by 2050 high, you're not going to be significantly different here, but what you are going to do is have some more periods of extreme drought. It's kind of hard to believe when you get the weather we're getting, but that's what we're saying. But by 2050, it'll be drought issues here. But note down to the south, there will be some years where we have very different years. Now, this is all high elevation, but it's not what our current trees are used to at the moment. Okay, so everything I'm going to talk about is diversification of our woodlands. Why do it? Pests and diseases, obviously we're just seeing that in front of us. Climate change, we can create more microclimates, CCF, and Ted's going to be talking about that, so I'm going to keep away from that. But we need to offer options for our future generations in an uncertain world. By leaving them all the same, without uncertainty as it pays out, we don't know what we're going to be leaving behind. So I'm a forester, remember, I'm just listening to what people are telling me. But some of that practical advice has come out with the UKFS, which really plan to put resilience. And I'd just be fascinated, those of you that are practicing foresters, how many of you actually have read the new UKFS and climate change pieces? Anybody prepared to put the hands up? That's incredibly few. And I can tell you, every professional audience I go to is we're not taking enough time to read the evidence. Because I've gone to Forestry Commission staff and the same answer. People say, well, oh, we know it's there, but we haven't actually read what the scientists are telling us we should be considering. So I was challenged with putting a climate change plan together for the forest estate for England. That's 3 years ago now. And I spoke to the scientists and I found out there was a few principles I had to get endorsed by the management board to give us a chance, I believed. And the first one was the scientists are trying to tell us what they think the future would be like. They're trying to give us clues. And I wanted the management board to say, well, can't we say to our staff to anticipate what's coming down the road, to have a real think about it? Okay. Am I going the wrong way? There's nothing happening here now. Ah, here we go. Right, okay. No. Oh. I can see it. It's fine. How long ago did I lose you lot? I didn't touch anything on it. It's falling out. Sorry? It's falling out. Yeah. You can push it back up the desk if you want.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, somebody give me a clue. What was the last picture you saw up there? Yeah. You saw the UKFS? Oh, well. All right. Okay, well, we'll catch up. Really, the principles that...
I think you're there, aren't you?
Nope, nothing up there.
Is that you?
That's me, there's nothing on the screen.
Oh.
Yeah, I was always right. Up there, I could see what was going on.
So we get the computer set up again.
I'll carry on.
If you want to carry on and just talk about some of the...
I'll carry on without my slides. Oh, hey, right, okay. By gum, this is why I stay as a forester rather than anything else. The world's too complicated. Okay, but what the board then signed up and said was, if you're going to anticipate what's coming down the line, that means you're going to have to take some risks, right? So in other words, risks are something you do really on best knowledge, not something stupid. So they signed up to that. But the other bit our scientists were saying to us is that the emissions in the air mean that 2050's high emissions are unavoidable. Human beings aren't changing the way they behave. So work to 2050 high. Now, if any of you don't believe in climate change, do it for pests and diseases, what I'm saying now, please. Because it doesn't really matter whether you're a believer or not, because I'm still surprised how many people in our industry say it's all too uncertain. Well, it is uncertain. Okay, so diversification is the theme. Now, when we started speaking to forest staff about diversification, came at the same time as the Reid report came out, and huge range of species coming out from there. Most of them, in truth, are inside our forests already. And when we asked our staff to go back and look at the 50s plantings, when foresters were still planting to soil type, most of these species were found to be in our forests and doing quite well. So we know a lot about them, it's just we stopped using them. So in amongst those species you saw there, one of the things that came home to me recently with the Clara thing was the fact that I don't see species like small-leaf lime going in. It's not a largely used species. And yeah, I'm told the pollen record says it was a major species in this country. Alder, aspen, you know, they're good trees, they grow fast. Then we got that other group of trees which are, you know, the purists are saying are not native. But I worry a bit, sycamore. Everybody says, oh, sycamore could do for ash. Well, squirrels kind of like sycamore, don't they? It's a bit of a problem. Sweet chestnut, Norway maple, Scots pine. I throw into the mix, maybe we should be looking at some of the near-natives or similar genuses. You know, there are other trees into Europe, and of course, the Americans have oaks and maples as well. You know, we could widen what we've got. They're there in all our towns and parks and gardens. Another thought I would certainly put to yourselves is trees, if we're using stuff from our own local location, are we doing the right thing? Now, the scientists' reports in the early 1990s said that if you moved a plant 2 degrees north on the same elevation, that it would outperform your same species that's growing locally on your own site. And with the degree of climate change, maybe we should be looking at 3 degrees south. Well, reality is, when we look at things like our oak and our beech, we've been doing this for donkey's years. You know, we don't know where our oak have come from a lot of the time. Certainly when I look at the records in Forest Enterprises nurseries, we used to get oak from all over Europe and we'd send it to every nursery inside England. So the stuff that was getting planted up north out of Tullyallen nursery was the same stuff as we were planting in East Anglia. So I just put that as a bit of a challenge to you. Is it more important that we've got good stock of known origin? Future Trees Trust have been doing some great work. I think it's worth thinking about some of their work they've done and their seeds they've done. Worth remembering that the French are foresters. You know, some really good breeding and tree planting gone on over there. The only thing I would say to you is, in taking those thoughts forward, can we grow it here? Does it need to be abroad? You know, think biosecurity. And the other thing, I just threw this word in because it's something I haven't heard since I was in college, was forest hygiene. You know, when we got diseases, do we try and tidy the place up and look after it? Okay, so just a thought again. Provenance, that's the range of Quercus robur. You know, as climate change comes in, there's no reason why we can't be getting oak from climate sources there. Plus, they've done a lot of breeding in these places in their oak. Those of you that are still interested in conifers, I think it's quite interesting that it works, yeah? That literally all our trees came from this area up in Northwest America. But in actual fact, that's the natural range of Douglas fir I've got on there, goes right the way down the west coast of America. So people that say, oh, we're going to lose some species. No, it's just we haven't exploited natural range. So I'm leaving a few more up there for you. Okay, broadleafs. This is the advice we've given to Forest Enterprise staff. But already since we started looking at our species list, you notice it's starting to reduce. We've taken out the South American species because of Phytophthora pseudosyringii, I think it is. A little bit worried about the feeling of some of the eucalypts. We see there's a place for them, but just not so sure. But anyway, it's quite a range of species there. This is all on our web resource. Now, I've left a piece of paper at the back of the room which has got our web pages on it, but everything that I'm talking about now is on those sheets, the links to it, okay? But there's a big area of resource here about trees and climate change and pests and diseases that I would ask you all to look at, because it is the advice we produce to go with the UKFS. Anybody actually looked at any of these pages? Because I think they're the best kept secret. I've got one hand up. 2, 3. Please go and look. There's not many hands, I can just say that. It's because we went through a difficult position with SR10 and everything else at this time and the panel report. We weren't allowed to publicise some of the good work we did. There's a huge amount of information out there for you on our web areas. That's going the wrong way. Right. And to help with species choice, Forest Research have had an electronic decision tool hidden away for years. It was called the Ecological Site Classification Tool, which tells you it's about tree species selection, doesn't it? Yeah, it's a helpful title. But basically, it's a tool which allows you to go in, put your grid square into it where you live, and then put good quality soil data into it. And that tool will throw you up 57 tree species to choose from. This is free. It's online, so the links are at the back. So this is, I've put in here, this isn't live, this is me just clicking the button. This was a Thetford area site I put in, where you can see on the top lines, you get options to use a default, which I tell you don't rely on because it's picking up a geology map at a very high level. Put good data in, it'll give you good data out. So this area in Thetford that I picked up, you're seeing there, you're getting suitability of a species from very green, very suitable, green just being suitable, going through to unsuitable. So I'll just click on through a bit because you get a huge range of species. And the species on the left, they're in blue with a highlight, those go to web links to tell you a lot more about the species itself and where it's suitable. So in other words, you're getting a pretty good indication of what you could grow on your site for yourself. And there's a huge range of species you wouldn't have thought of in there. But all of them are species growing in this country that we've got a good amount of knowledge about. We asked them, would they go one further? Because we're doing all this talk about climate change, are you prepared to give us a second guess? Now, the first information I gave you is at 100 metre squares. So it's pretty accurate meteorological data. The data for climate change, by the uncertainty of it, means it goes out to 5 kilometre squares, so it's not as accurate. But you will see there, if you look through it, you'll find some species that we're saying suitable today, we're saying by 2050, you shouldn't be using. It's the scientist's best advice. I'm not going to challenge the climate science. If I was going to offer somebody a grant or advice to a client, I would say, well, sure, I should at least offer you the best advice from Forest Research for you to make your decision with. Okay, and that also then will give you your NVC classes. Okay, I'm just going to close up quickly because I'm sure questions are more of interest. What I would put to you is we need to start to diversify our planting. But there is a reality. If you went out and tried to get some of the trees I've mentioned from a nursery right now, you wouldn't have a chance because the nurseries need us to show we're willing to do it. Now, the first sign that Forestry Commission England did was to change the new planting grant to signal we really want to start to support adaptation measures in the grants. Now that's going to come out on the restocking grants as well. Encouragement to support diversification. I also say to you to think about low carbon options. Regeneration has its real place to play. And I'm sure Ted will say more about that this afternoon. And I've managed to source a little bit of money to go around the country and help give people a little bit more awareness training on what knowledge is available for people to work on. Ted will introduce himself later, but Ted's being contracted to do that, and he's talking about maybe we can do several phases of education over the next couple of years. One with species awareness, then some real training on silviculture, and we'll follow that up some more work on how to make CCF work. So that's a plug in advance. Thank you.
John, before we go on to any questions, I think the work that the local enterprise partnerships are doing on learning and skills and CPD training is something that we'd certainly like to link in with your work. I think the challenge to the Forestry Commission, if I give them a challenge, and it is to actually look at their website, because it's actually got amazing amount of very useful information, but as you quite rightly say, it's all there, but it is kind of sometimes quite hard to find. But actually, I've learnt a huge amount from your presentation, so thanks. Can we take some questions, please?
Question, lady with the glasses on.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
My name is Hannah Povey. Basically, you're promoting a wider variety in species. I think from what experience I've got, people plant what they plant because of the market that they're planting for. How do you anticipate the market changing, as in the mills, how are they going to adapt to the new species? Because, you know, you need to fulfill what the market want anyway.
Yeah, it's a classic chicken and egg scenario. What we do know is the sawmillers aren't going to be very chuffed if we lose Sitka spruce overnight or they lose a supply line. The species that have all been picked that are on those lists are because they have at least good timber qualities in their home country or used somewhere else. Now, CON4 have been looking into this subject, looking at nursery and at the timber end. They recognise that a lot of our marketing of timber has been done on the basis of species specific, rather than following a sort of American style of whitewood, redwood, moving things on. They're thinking a lot of it is the way that they will present and sell, because the timbers we're talking about have their structural properties. It might change things. The biggest concern is using it as a reason not to do something different. The will take us a time to try and tease out what you'd call sustainable volumes. Because, I mean, you know, if we plant just a little bit of one species, we don't plant more around the country, that could become an issue. So we have to get at least sustainable amounts going. But I think today we've got to start, and my biggest challenge is we've got to give the nursery trade confidence, because right this moment they're worried about things like RDP, where that's going, post-ash, what are we going to be asking them to plant, you know, where is it going to go? It's all risk. And that's part of the reason why I think we've ended up with so much of our trees getting grown in the continent, because our nursery producers do not feel the confidence to second guess what we're doing. As far as I'm aware, very few people will order their trees more than just that season.
Very true, John. I think your poem on spruce just highlights how resilient or how reliant we are on spruce, and in this part of the world on pine. Any other questions for John, please? To the back. Andrew at the back.
I wonder if there's any scope for, with our view expansion of woodland, planting trial plots of small monitoring plots of the food plants. For example, the American ash for the fuel people. If we were to include a very small proportion as plots in our new woodlands with the food plants of the species, pest species that haven't arrived there yet, and monitor those, could we not get slightly ahead of the game?
Yeah, I think the scientists are calling it their sentinel plots, because I've heard discussions about that. To actual state of how much of this or where they've been placed, I do not know. I certainly know that the two national collections at Westonbirt and Bedgebury have sentinel sites on there, if you like. But I think demonstration plots are critical. The only concern I do have with relying on taking the science to come forward is that there is pan-European tests of species and provenance, and there's been a lot of press about those pieces of work. By the time we get any results from that, we'll be so far down the line it's not worth waiting for. So there really is an element of we must not be risk averse at the moment.
Steve, let's put you on the spot with regards to grant funding. Am I right in saying that if landowners are keen to diversify their species, the Woodland Creation Grant will certainly support that? Maybe over and above with additional contributions.
Yes, that's right. As you're aware, I'll probably say more about this afternoon, but the planting grants have increased overall by at least £1,000 per hectare. In some cases, another £2,000 on top of that. And we're very open to discussions about novel species, particularly in woodland creation situations.
Okay, thanks, Steve. One last question over here.
I know there's some very strong advocates of that, particularly in Wales, saying let nature do its own bit. I suppose it's my background. I've been involved in a very vibrant timber business, basically based around softwoods. And I know they are feeling very vulnerable at the moment in terms of sustainability of timber supply into the future. And I feel there really is a case for significant more coniferous planting to support that industry. But I think equally there's a place for letting nature do its bit. But I don't think we should be 100% reliant on either.
Great answer.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, John. That was a fascinating talk.